Well, it's great to be back with my church family. I had a wonderful time away on my renewal leave. I am so grateful to you and to the leadership of our church, to our church staff who helped to protect that time, Pastor Rachel, who did such a wonderful job. I talked about this a bit in church on Sunday, and the opportunity to spend time with my family, with Robin, my wife, and with our kids on the road trip, just invaluable, irreplaceable time, as well as to get a little distance from the daily demands of being a pastor, to gain some perspective, as well as to do some grieving. I've been a pastor for 30 years over a number of churches, 30 years of bringing in members and being in relationships. I had some grieving to do of folks that I'm no longer in touch with. It's just not even possible. And to kind of work through some of that. And I did. I really intentionally used that time to address some of that grief in my own life. And so I'm really, really thankful for the time away. The time was a renewal leave, not a sabbatical, that it wasn't a time to learn a specific skill or to go get educated. It was about renewing. It wasn't a time to come down off the mountain with 10 commandments for the next step in the church, but that doesn't mean that God wasn't speaking. And I thought what I'd do today is I'd share with you a couple of things that I really reflected on while I was away, and see if perhaps that resonates with you. And the first thing that I'd share with you is that I became convicted early on that I am not doing enough listening to the Holy Spirit of God. I'm really good about going to God with a list of requests. I'm really good at talking at God. I'm not so good at listening, and I'm not so good about really having a conversation heart to heart with the Holy Spirit about what's going on in my life. Before I left, I had been passing on a book called Reimagine, Examine, which is a practice of prayer every day, kind of reflecting with God over your day and what's been happening. It's really challenged me to create more space in my life to listen and be open-hearted with God about what's going on. And that's critical because I want to know where God is leading. I'm a doer. I like to create strategies and lists and get started, and we have this thing we want to get done. And so I'll rush right in. And the problem is I don't wind up following God's direction. I wind up trying to lead God's direction. Last couple of years, you may have seen a number of articles on something called confirmation bias, which is that we tend to, in our mind, filter out things that resonate with what we already believe. We watch news now, they say, news channels based upon how it confirms our mindset that we already believe. You may see it in a practical way. You buy a white car and now suddenly everybody's driving a white car. It's kind of the way your brain filters information, make it align with your reality. And I think sometimes we fall into that in terms of the church, that we can easily look around and see what we want to believe about it. And the problem is we often wander off from where God is trying to go and God is leading us to go. And so I really challenged the leadership on Sunday and our leadership council about how can we as a church and as leaders create more space to listen to the Holy Spirit and not just rush off and trying to get things done or accomplished the way we think should happen. So that was something that really spoke to me and I'm really working on right now. The second area that really kind of poked me was the conviction that I need to really be looking forward and spend less time trying to look in the rearview mirror. I hear fairly regularly that we want to get back to the way things were. It's true in our life, it's true in our work situation, it's true in our neighborhood. Things are different. They're different in life in general, and that is certainly true of the way things are at church. Talking with a buddy of mine who was preaching at camp last month. I usually preach at camp for a week each summer, but because I was gone, I didn't know. But he was at camp and he was preaching, and some of the staff at the camp were complaining that camp wasn't the same. They had to break into pods, and they couldn't go do as many things as they did, so on. And they were lamenting that they wanted to go back to the way it was. And he said, it's true, it's different, but in the same way, some of the things are still the same. You still love the kids, you still preach the gospel, you still be in ministry and spend time together. And I think that's true of church. We want church to go back to the way it was, even though life is completely different. And even though if we always stay the same, it means we're not growing. Often growth comes through challenge and change. But in some sense, things are the same. And it's the underlying pieces of sharing the gospel, of being a family of Christ, of caring for one another, being in ministry and sharing and being mission to the community. And they have different forms, but the fundamentals are still the same. And I want to really work on focusing on that. I get we want to go back, and what I hear people when I hear them say that is they want to go back to the energy and vitality of that. And I understand that, and I think the day will come if we get back and really focus on what God is bringing to our table now, and what what we can do to live into the fundamentals of being followers of Jesus. And the story that really resonated with me about that is the parable of Jesus about the sower of the seeds. I honestly can easily get wrapped up in worrying about the church and worrying about where it's going and the size of the church and who's attending and who's not attending. And when I read this parable, it just really hit me that, I am to sow faith and love. I'm to share the gospel. And some will get that and some will not. But I can't make the seed grow roots. And I'm not there to have the seed grow the stalk. That's God's work. My job is to be faithful and to be a faithful follower of Jesus and to share that love and story of Christ with others. And so I want to really spend time looking forward. I think there's hope for the future and hope that the church will do that as well. Tangentially, one of the pieces that really resonated with me was the desire to do a sermon series on the book of Galatians. Galatians is probably the earliest recorded letter in the New Testament, earliest recorded book probably in the New Testament. And it's about the early church as they were going through kind of an identity crisis. They're going through a crisis of faith and seeking their way forward as they try to hold on to their roots, but also follow the leading of God. And so I've spent a lot of time reading through the book of Galatians and doing some study. And we're going to start a new series in 2 weeks that I'm calling Reset, like resetting back to school or resetting after COVID or resetting church in these times. And I hope that you'll join me. There'll be a number of studies, one that will go in a deep dive if you really want to go deep into it, one will be a little lighter. There'll be a reading list. And so I just encourage you to be thinking about resetting and what does that look like for the future, and what is God calling us to do and to be as a church looking forward. The last piece that really resonated with me while I was away was the idea of church fundamentally being about ongoing relationships. Programs, of course, help people come, worship is one of our own spirituality, but some of the glue really is about being in a relationship with each other in an ongoing way. A little story, I was in a meeting about a week ago, and it was a Monday night meeting, and they were sharing that that the men's group had dinner. They have dinner once a month, and they had 28 men come to dinner. Wonderful celebration. We're celebrating this. This was a Tuesday night, the day after. And I turned to the gentleman who was showing and said, I have to apologize to you. I met a visitor on Sunday who had come to the church, first time. We have them every week. And I did not say, hey, why don't you join me for dinner tomorrow night with this group of guys? I'm really concerned about what we're inviting people into in terms of relationship. Are we just offering an hour on Sunday for people to come and connect with God and then leave? Or are we trying to be in life together? And that's hard. That takes effort. That takes prioritization. But I believe it's the way that we're going to move forward. And I think particularly if we look at building into ongoing relationships around areas of need. I have to confess, I didn't go to church when I was on my renewal leave. It's the first time in my life that I've missed church more than 3 or 4 weeks in a row. And I discovered in all the wonderful things I was doing that it's pretty easy to find something else to do than come to church. There's so many opportunities, so many things, so many demands. Even just resting can be something that becomes important. And I realized that those people that come to church on Sunday really want to come. Not only are there lots of opportunities, there's obstacles, COVID and safety and so forth. Get in the car, you have to go. And so I realized that, people come because they really want to come. And they want to come, and they have some needs that they want to address. We all have needs. They have some things that they want to connect with. That may be a crisis in their life. It may be grief. It may be a parenting challenge. It may be a need for community. It may be a spiritual hunger. And I believe that the way forward for our church is going to be to find ways to create ongoing relationships around those areas of need that help us connect to each other and grow into the likeness of Christ. That, after all, is the point, to grow into the likeness of Christ. And that's something we only can do with each other, not something we do fully by ourselves. And so relationships, getting back to the basics, looking forward, listening to God's Holy Spirit about where we need to go. This, to me, is what I draw away from my renewal leave. And this, to me, I believe, will be integral for what lies ahead for our church. I am more optimistic now than I have been in a couple of years about the church. There are more than enough people in our community, in our city, to just pack the pews of the church. The challenge for us now is to be faithful and open and to invest ourselves in each other and other people that are in our community. I look forward to doing that. I'm excited about doing that, and it's good to be back. So God bless you, and I'll see you at church on Sunday.